G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle. So, following on from all the previous problems we've had in the last few weeks with the company, that company being Games Workshop, I want to talk about consumer guarantees. So, within Australia, we have certain things that businesses must do, and if they fail to do them, they will get fined by the Australian government. Thanks to this system, which works surprisingly well, despite it being a government initiative, companies like Steam, for example, Valve, they didn't used to do customer refunds. Neither did Sony. Neither did Nintendo. All of these video gaming brands now have to, because this consumer organisation actually took them to court and won. The government actually achieving something good is shocking, for a start, that they pulled it off. But yeah, there are certain guidelines in place. So why am I bringing this up? Well, an oft-cited complaint about complaints that I see is people say, look, it's just toys, get over it. It's just doll, get over it. It's just, whatever. It's a luxury. It's a hobby. Well, the thing is, your rights do not go away because you've invested in a hobby. Those rights are the same no matter whether you invest in a hobby, whether you invest in electronic software, whether you invest in an automobile. Your rights are your rights. That's why they're called rights. And it's diminishing what a person has and their agency by saying to them that, no, you don't have a right to complain. Well, you do. You have a legal right to complain if you get screwed over. That's the whole point of these things existing. They don't just go away because it's your hobby. They don't just go away because it's a plastic toy. The fact that maybe the existence of the item doesn't offer anything to society at large, it's not some invention, it's not a medicine, it's not a new method of transport, something like that, it doesn't diminish the fact that what it boils down to is an exchange of currency has occurred. You have paid someone for a product, and if that product doesn't live up to what you want it to, then it is perfectly acceptable to complain about it. There are many companies which change the price of their goods. McDonald's used to have an ice cream that's sold here in Australia, and they increased the price dramatically overnight. People complained, McDonald's dropped the price back down. So, just because business exists and just because they can charge what they want doesn't mean the market isn't allowed to complain about those prices. Because at the end of the day, all sales between a customer and a business have a middle ground. It's that same middle ground that exists when you go and you buy a car. You're debating with a person and saying, this is what I'm willing to pay. And they say, well, this is the minimum I want to sell for. And a bartering occurs. Now, with Games Workshop, historically, there is no bartering system. There is no sales. Games Workshop says, here is the item, take it or leave it. And as a consumer, or customer, not a consumer, let's be honest, it's up to you whether or not you agree with that. Some people do, some people don't. Okay, but telling the people who don't agree with the policy as is that they're wrong, it isn't right, because you've got thousands of years historically of businesses saying this is what you've got to pay for it and people fighting back against it. So what are some of these guarantees? Well, the biggest one that I want to point out is these three here under consumer guarantees on product and services. So since January 1st, 2011, when this current set of standards came into existence, the first one up the top here is, products must be of acceptable quality, that is, safe, lasting, with no faults. It must look acceptable and do all the things that someone would normally expect them to do. So what might an example of Games Workshop failing to do this be? Okay, and this isn't a bash Games Workshop episode, but this is just to enlighten people as to what might happen if you took some of these rights to the consumer watchdog or to court. I couldn't tell you the outcome of it because I'm not a legal expert, but I want to give people an idea of just how finely the line is skirted sometimes by a company and we're told not to complain by other hobbyists. So let's say you buy a codex and that codex is missing a page. It is not lasting with no faults because it has a fault. It's missing a page. Does it look acceptable? No, it's missing a page. does it do all the things you would normally expect that codex to do? No, if it's missing a page, it's missing rules, it's missing something. They may offer a free FAQ, yes, it doesn't fix the problem with the book. So really what they have to offer you is a new book or a full refund on the product. Now, this often doesn't occur. You might get something like what happened with the Horus Heresy Book 9, where some of the books came damaged. They hadn't made enough of the books to replace the damaged ones, so they turned around to people and said, you can have, a £10 voucher or whatever it may be, or return the item to us type thing. Well, that's not good enough as far as Australian law is concerned. Products must match the descriptions made by the salesperson on packaging and labels and in promotions or advertising. It must match any demonstration model or sample you asked for. It must be fit for the purpose the business told you it would be fit for, and for any purpose that you made known to the business prior to purchasing. It comes with full title and ownership. It must not carry any hidden debts or extra charges. It must come with undisturbed possession, so no one has a right to take the goods away or prevent you from using them. That's a really tricky one, which we'll come back to. It must meet any extra promises made about performance, condition, and quality, such as lifetime guarantees and money-back offers. And it must have spare parts or repair facilities available for a reasonable time after purchase, unless you were told otherwise. So, again, an interesting one. For example, what happens if you buy a model kit and that model kit goes out of production because you bought it on a last chance to buy, or you bought it on a made to order? Will they replace that model kit? Not if they've stopped production, they can't. And as you know, from a last chance to buy perspective, once something's gone, it's, gone. They don't tend to come back to you and say, well, here, have another. They usually say something along the lines of, it's gone now, you can have a refund, or something like that. It must match descriptions made by the salesperson. How often have some of these limited edition items matched their descriptions? Many people have been able to go back and notice that Games Workshop is going and retroactively changing their advertising on their community page. There are whole videos dedicated to this from people because they changed the wording, because they couldn't deliver on the description. And so people bought some items based on this original advertising, which didn't pan out on the final product. And once they realized it didn't pan out, they complained to Games Workshop. Games Workshop then changed the advertising in retrospect. Not a great move. And again, don't believe me? Just go out and Google it. It must match any demonstration model or sample you ask for. Again, most of the time, this is true. They achieve this. And yeah, good on them, because most of the time they're demonstrating the exact product that they're giving you. So it should match the demonstration. Now, this third one, it must be fit for the purpose the business told you it would be fit for, and for any purpose that you made known to the business before purchasing. This is an interesting situation because this deliberately states that there is to be a back and forth between the customer. So you say to the person at the counter, will this codex last for a year? They say yes, that's the agreement, right? And this is a lot to throw onto the poor person at the counter. If you ask Games Workshop in a stream or something, they might not even answer the question, which is another problem. But if that codex is then superseded in 6 months, what happens then? What if the tactical squad you bought, the kit becomes... It doesn't have to be a tactical, it could be any kit. What if that kit becomes illegal within 6 months? Oh, it's been changed, it's no longer in the rules. Yeah, you still physically own it, but you now no longer can use it. It must come with full title and ownership. Well, yeah, when you buy a model, it's yours. When you buy a book, it's yours. Digital products, maybe that can change. It must not carry any hidden debts or extra charges. This is an interesting one for me because what happens when you buy and again, I'll use a codex here because this is where I think a lot of these problems occur. What happens if you buy a book or a codex and it doesn't take into account any FAQs? Let's say it's an early codex, early in a system, Like it came out at the start of 7th or something, and you don't realise, but 8th edition's like 3 months away. And you've bought this book, and all of a sudden they start releasing things like Gathering Storm and things like that, and you're like, well, okay. In order to get the most utility out of my codex now, they've released all these extra formations and data slates and decurions, and, does this play into what I've already bought? Because in order to really get the most out of, say, Codex Space Marines and a Space Marine army, I probably need these other things. I don't know the answer, by the way, guys. This is just my interpretation of something someone could say about the product. Just want to be very clear on that, because it's very questionable. You've bought the product and you're not forced into anything, but come on. It must come with undisturbed possession. No one has the right to take away the goods or prevent you from using them. So what happens when an edition ends? What happens when your codex becomes superseded? What if your codex is something like Sisters of Battle and you got a couple of months of pandemic use out of it, and now it's gone? That's a problem. Now, I get it. On one hand, you could say, it doesn't matter, go back and play the old one with your friends. Yes, you can do that. But if every single person in this hobby starts playing their old edition and they want to pick their favourite edition and play that alone, then you get a massive crack through the middle of the community, either of selfish bastards or people who honestly prefer what they had in the past because it was more thematic and more fun. It goes both ways. There are people who want a power game. Oh, the rules are better in this codex. But there are people who might say, 3.5 Chaos Codex had the flavour that current Chaos Codexes completely lack. So they want to go and step back to that. That's a legitimate argument. So it's a funny thing because they're not taking the good away from you, but they do prevent you from using that good as it was advertised to you. And like I say, a lot of this comes down to a reasonable lifetime. And that is something that the consumer guarantees talk about. Does something last as long as it should be reasonably expected to? And I would argue with something like a codex, you should be able to get 3 years out of it, going off historical codexes. Okay? Pretty much every edition of the game sees one codex for each faction unless that faction is Space Marines. Now, if your faction gets a codex right at the end of an edition and then a new one drops a week later and then another codex comes out straight away, you just got screwed over. Hardcore. And that does not meet the definition. I think if you legally did challenge Games Workshop, I think someone would have a very strong case in that regard. Because you've completely superseded the product they've bought, and their understanding when they bought that product was that it would be able to be available for a reasonable time after purchase. That the rules would be viable. So an interesting thing. The next point, meet any extra promises made about performance, condition, and quality, such as lifetime guarantees and money-back offers. Generally, they do, but as I said, Games Workshop has been caught out in the past with a few funny things they've said. One of the things that I would like to talk about in meeting any extra promises about performance, condition, and quality, lifetime guarantees, money-back offers, etc., etc. What about Cursed City? What happens when you have a product that's released and this product will be supported long term? It gets released to huge hype, fanfare, and acclaim, and within a week is gone. People bought that product based on the understanding that this would be a supported system, not a one-off game in this box. Get it and forget it. What happens then? Oh, well, Games Workshop, they have a legal conundrum on their hands because they made this Cursed City product and it may impinge on some of Bethesda's intellectual property. Okay. Did they only figure that out in the week that it released? They didn't pull the product, issue an announcement to the community and state what the problem was, that they were working to fix it, and they will try and bring out an expansion that fits within the realms of copyright later. No, they didn't make a statement like that at all, did they? They released the product fully knowing this. People bought the product on the understanding it would be supported, and then it fucking vanished. that is not acting in good faith as a company, and it does not meet these guidelines. Again, to my understanding of them. Having spare parts and repair facilities available, well, as I said before, I covered off on if a kit is sold to you and then that kit goes out of production straight away and never returns, how are you going to get replacement parts for it? Forge World sells you a faulty model on last chance to buy, full of air bubbles, maybe the resin's not cured correctly, who knows? At most, they're going to say, well, you can have your money back. At most. There are circumstances that are very much in the minority, where people have turned around and said this model is faulty to Forge World, sent their emails through, sent pictures through, and Forge World's gone, nah, when it is, but we deem that you've messed with the model in some capacity, therefore we're not going to replace it. They try some bullshit legalese. Usually when it would really affect them to replace it, that's why they pull it. For instance, they've turned around to people before and said, clean it with this product, yada yada. People then turn around and say, hey, I did clean it with this product, and the company goes, oh, no, well, you've added chemicals to it, we can't help you. Even though they followed Forge World's own advice. That has happened, and it is rare, I want to stress, but it has happened. Then you've got services. Services must be provided with acceptable care and skill or technical knowledge and taking all necessary steps to avoid loss and damage. That's interesting. That would be, to me, something like shipping. Shipping and the shipping of Forge World products is very interesting because I've shown on this channel things like decals have been folded by the company and put into the packaging box. It wasn't the post office that did it. No, the company chose to fold the do not bend decal sheet to stick it into the box, and then the box as a whole went off to the post office. So that was on the company. It must be fit for the purpose or give the results that you and the business had agreed to. Again, you and the business. Now, your agreement could be as simple as, I want to buy this. The company says, you can buy this here, pay me money, and you accept, and that's the end of the exchange. Services must be delivered within a reasonable time when there is no agreed end date. That's also an interesting one, and many different directions you can go into. Now, consumer guarantees on products and services also apply to bundled products and services, gifts with a proof of purchase, sale items, online products and services bought from Australian businesses, and second-hand products from businesses taking into account age and condition. And of course, the consumer guidelines go along. You have things like exceptions, rights to repair, and such, all included. Now, the Australian law is very interesting, and I highly encourage Australians to go out and have a look at this. And the points I've made in this episode are, highly debatable. That's what I'll call them. Because something like a codex, there is no set-in-stone system in place of how long something like that is meant to last. We know a codex will be superseded by default. I think the problem comes in with the understanding of how long will it take to be superseded. And of course, how long will it be replaced with an acceptable product? So if you want to buy an army, and you buy it with the understanding that it will get updated soon, and that update doesn't come for 10 years, like say a 3rd edition Dark Eldar army, you don't get an update until the end of 5th edition, right on the cusp of 6th. If you buy into that army, and you buy into it a couple of months into 3rd edition, you're going to get a lot of enjoyment out of it for a little while. And then what happens when you're stuck with that same Dark Elder army year after year after year, and it's never getting looked into? That's kind of a bummer too. And I don't know where the hell that would fall into these consumer guarantees. But the point to really bring home with this is that, although I've raised a whole bunch of different points that just for people to ponder, and again, it's something to tack on Games Workshop, it's just circumstances of things going wrong that the consumer can look at, because you have rights. The point of it all is that just because it's a hobby, it doesn't mean your rights vanish. It's not entitled to claim your rights. They exist for a reason, because companies abuse things like limited lifetimes, false advertising, saying that something is going to last a long time and then replacing it, making something that's meant to last illegal to use. This happens all the time with businesses, and so that's why these guidelines are being put in place. It doesn't matter whether it's a toy. If you pay $200 for a piece of gold, or whether you pay $200 for a piece of plastic shaped like a space marine, you made a purchase from a business, and there is an understanding that goes on a back and forth between a customer and a business. And there is nothing wrong with saying, I don't like the way the business has conducted themselves in this circumstance, and it doesn't work for me, the consumer, the customer. That's perfectly fine, and where people fall down is this whole, it's just a hobby aspect. It doesn't matter if it's just a hobby, guys. Okay? It may not matter to you personally, and you may think it's a little issue because it's something you do for fun. But at the end of the day, real money is on exchange here. Games Workshop is not a charity. They do not offer a free service. They have a very expensive service for what they offer compared to other companies. And keeping your rights in mind is a very important thing to do. And like I said, there are a whole bunch of guarantees in here. These do not go away because it's a toy. I mean, think about that logically if you took it to court. Okay, you want to defend Games Workshop because you're such a loving fan of them, and your argument in court is, oh, well, Your Honour, it's just a toy. Does it really matter? The judge is going to turn around and go, yes, it does matter. What's your evidence to defend yourself? Because that is not an argument. The judge would throw your defense out before it even made it to the courtroom, actually. It would go out in the proceedings. So, keep that in mind. If it wouldn't pass the test with the judge, why the hell should it pass a test with the other consumers, the other customers of the product? Just because it's not an issue to one person doesn't mean that it isn't an issue in general. And again, the one I like to bring up is the product lasting, providing what it was designed to. The agreement with the customer when they buy something like a codex is that they're going to get their money's worth out of the product. If you buy an index at the start of, 8th edition, it gets superseded with a codex very shortly after, but then that codex is itself semi-superseded by a Index Astartes or a chapter approved, and then that is also partially superseded by bringing out a new campaign book. This really strays into the grey realms of, has the product, been correctly advertised? Are you getting... you can't just say, oh, well, the person that bought this book for the rules can still read it for the fluff, therefore it's living up to a long-lasting aspect. Well, no, because they didn't buy it for the fluff, they bought it for the combination of the background, the images, and the rules. And you've taken the rules aspect and thrown it away on them. You can't say that, well, the rest of it still works. It'd be like saying, a person buys a car to drive, the car's engine breaks, well, it's okay, they can still sit in the car. We haven't taken that car off them. Well, you haven't taken the car off them, but the car doesn't work as intended when they purchased it. So, anyway, this is a lot of points about consumer guarantees, and every country is going to be different. This is the Australian one. Go in, read it, match it up to Games Workshop, and decide for yourself if they actually meet the criteria for what they're promising. And if they don't appear to be on the surface, that's maybe a sign that you perhaps want to change the way you conduct business with the company. That isn't to say boycott them or anything like that. Like, I don't care much for boycotts. I don't think they work with this kind of company. I have explained a better way of trying to get their attention in 2 videos ago. But at the end of the day, a relationship, an actual relationship flows in 2 directions. It's not just what the business offers, it's what you, the customer, are offering. And that exchange, that back and forth, is important and it's legally recognized. I'm Mac with the Outer Circle. Thank you all for watching this episode, and I'll see you on the next one.